What's up, Dolphins fans? Nic Rohloff here at Dolphins Today by Chat Sports, and I want to bring you guys a video. I'm currently on vacation, but I still had to come out here and talk some Dolphins football because Chris Grier in Miami brought in 8 NFL free agents for a workout yesterday afternoon, and it could be signaling that maybe he is looking to add to this roster, and we'll also go over some of the news and notes from training camp over the past couple days as well. So make sure you subscribe because even when I'm on vacation back home visiting the family before the preseason gets underway, I'm still going to bring you guys content and bring you guys video, so hit that sub button. But there was 8 players that Chris Grier brought in for a workout, and it was headlined by a pretty big name, which shocked me a little bit, in the form of Greedy Williams. He was a former second-round pick in 2019 by the Cleveland Browns. He is a corner. He started a lot of games while he got his career underway in Cleveland, but never really found his footing, was always struggling, didn't play in 2023, but was signed by the Eagles in March, but then just was cut. So it's very interesting that Williams came in for a workout with Miami. He is someone who I actually was very high on back in 2019 when he was getting drafted. I thought he was a first-round talent, but he just has never been able to at least live up to what his expectations were coming out of LSU. Has 2 career interceptions, has struggled in coverage. And it's just fascinating to me that Miami would bring him in, though, because I feel like this cornerback room is very, very competitive. You obviously have your starters in Kader Kohou, Kendall Fuller, Jalen Ramsey, but behind them, you have Ethan Bonner, who has been doing exceptionally well so far in training camp. You have Cam Smith, who did sustain an injury, nothing crazy, but has been out a couple practices here. You have Saran Neal, Nick Needham. So you have a lot of depth at corner, so it was a little surprising to me to see a high-profile corner free agent in the form of Greedy Williams come in and work out for Miami. But you never know. Maybe they're just looking for some depth pieces going over before training camp gets underway. He wasn't the only other corner that ended up working out for Miami yesterday, though. Rashad Wildgoose, a former 6th-round pick of the Buffalo Bills in 2021, he worked out. And then also Javelin Guerdy, who went as an undrafted free agent in 2020. So 3 of the 8 players, there's also one more, I almost forgot, Faion Hicks, who was a 7th-round pick by the Broncos in 2022. So out of the 8 players that worked out for Miami yesterday, 4 of them were corners, and maybe that just alerts to the point that they want more depth in this room, which would be kind of surprising because I do think the depth is one of the strongest points of the Dolphins secondary, and I've often talked about that if one of the top guys goes down, they could be in trouble. And I still believe that. Like, if Jalen Ramsey or Kendall Fuller got hurt, that cornerback room would get dicey. But just in terms of having solid, valuable depth pieces behind them, I do think it's pretty solid. And with the emergence of Ethan Bonner continuing to impress, and even other wide receivers like Jalen Waddle has talked about how well Ethan Bonner has played in the first week or 2 of camp. Like, this cornerback room might be sneaky better than what we even think, and that's hard to believe considering this is one of the strongest points of the roster. Before we get into some of the other names here that worked out for Miami, let me know, do you want to sign Greedy Williams? He's the top corner that the Dolphins brought in for a workout. Let me know if you'd want to sign the former 2nd-round pick. Type Y for yes or type N for no. As we progress here, there was actually a lot of wide receivers who also worked out. So out of the 8 names that came in for Miami, 4 corners, 3 wide receivers, 1 offensive lineman. One of the wide receivers is a pretty big name as well, Willie Snead, the longtime wide receiver for the New Orleans Saints. He's bounced around the league over the past 3 or 4 years. He's played in Cleveland, he's played in Carolina, Baltimore, Las Vegas, Carolina again, San Francisco, but obviously is more well known as a New Orleans Saint, who he was very, very good in 2015 and 2016 when he caught 69 and 72 balls in those 2 years respectively. But Snead is a much older wide receiver, and maybe they're just thinking depth because some of these back-end wide receivers have struggled a little bit. 7th round pick Taj Washington hasn't been able to participate and is out for the year after being placed on IR before camp even got underway, which was a disappointment and basically means he's redshirting for next season. Erik Ezukanma hasn't been as good as we might have thought he was going to be this upcoming camp as well. So maybe Chris Grier is looking well. These guys that we originally had that we thought was going to be a competitive battle for that sixth wide receiver spot behind the big three, Braxton Berrios and Malik Washington, they have been a little bit disappointing, and maybe we want to add some more competition. Willie Snead being one of them. A couple other names here. Xavier White, who I've never really heard of, if I'm going to be honest. Kind of a UDFA, was released by Indianapolis in July, played at Texas Tech, really have never heard of him before. And then the other one is Richie James, which is also an intriguing name because he has returned punts, he has returned kicks in the past for the New York, Kansas City. Didn't really do much last year for the Chiefs, had 10 catches for 114 yards, 2 fumbles too. It's not great, but he's more well known for his time with New York because he was their primary punt returner and kind of slot guy, but he was not very good for the Giants in 2022. So I don't know. I just don't think it's really worth signing any of these guys if I'm gonna be honest. Unless you really feel like you don't have enough or you don't like what you have in-house between Sexton, between Ezukanma, River Craycraft. To me, there's no reason to bring in another wide receiver, and I would very much like to look at a different position, which could be on the offensive line, which, by the way, before we continue with this video, make sure you are subscribed. I always said it off the top, but when Greg Van Roten, our sweet prince, unfortunately got signed by the New York Giants, I was on the golf course, but I still brought you all a little short to make sure you guys were updated with the news. So we're going to make sure you're covered with everything. That was a heartbreaker that Greg Van Roten got signed because we know how much I wanted him, and we've talked about him so much on the channel. It would have been nice to see that come to fruition because I believed he could still be that starting right guard for Miami. But it's pretty clear that Chris Grier is going to roll with the in-house guys, at least as of now, in the form of Jack Driscoll, Robert Jones, Liam Eichenberg, Lester Cotton for that starting right guard spot, which we are going to talk about in just a second. But I did want to mention the last player the Dolphins worked out, Jalen Moore, an offensive tackle, former fifth-round pick by San Francisco 49ers in 2021. He's only really played in 7 games in his career. Started 6 last season for San Francisco, which was very interesting. He started 2 games last year, played in 6. But Jalen Moore, not really a name that's really on my radar for someone Miami will sign, but we'll have to see if Chris Grier actually strikes a deal. But I did want to talk about the offensive line in just a second here because it's been off to a rocky start in training camp, and obviously Tua is now participating in full 11-on-11s after getting that extension last Friday, which was very nice to see. But the offense still hasn't been clicking. It's had its moments, but the Dolphins defense has primarily dominated the team activities so far when they're playing 11-on-11. And now that could be looked at 2 ways. One, you had a top offense last year, and the fact that your defense is dominating your offense without Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb participating tells you how good this defense could be, right? That's a positive. Obviously, the negative is that the offense really hasn't found a stride this early in camp, but it is pretty natural to have the defense win early on in training camp because this is easier to communicate and easier to put things together. Meanwhile, in the offense, you have to be on time, no cadences, no tendencies, get on the same page. It's a little bit more difficult. But looking at the 2 trenches, because the Dolphins' defensive line has been dominant so far. It really has. And that is without Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. And some of the reason why that is this is a very positive thing. You can knock on the Dolphins' offensive line all you want, but Emmanuel Ogbah, who signed right before camp to be the Shaq Barrett replacement, and first-round rookie Chop Robinson, have just been getting raving reviews from people at training camp, and they've been terrific. I've also seen Zach Sealer get an orange jersey as well. So this defensive line has been playing extremely well early on in training camp, and that's, like I said, without your top 2 pass rushers. So this front 7 will be very versatile, very good for Miami this season, which is huge because you need to get after the quarterback, especially in the AFC, when you have to play against Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud, Josh Allen. It is brutal, the amount of good quarterbacks that are in the AFC, and you need to get pressure on them. And Chop Robinson, who I was a little bit low on at the NFL draft, has been proving me wrong early on, and I cannot wait to watch him attack other teams teams in preseason and early on in the year, because if he's dominating Miami, you could only hope he's going to be able to do that to opponents and really showcase that first step that has just been exploding by players. Now, there has been some questions about his ability to stop the run, but he has been great in the effect of getting after the quarterback, which is what you drafted him to do more primarily. But after the positives of talking about the defensive line, that also comes with a little bit of negativity on the offensive line. Aaron Brewer could have a really good season replacing Connor Williams, but he's got off to a little bit of a rocky start in terms of snapping the football. And I know that's going to be something Dolphins fans do not want to hear, considering the struggles that Connor Williams had at snapping the football. It's been a little bit interesting to see Brewer all over the place with his snaps, at least as we currently sit. I will give you caution. It is a little common to see center struggle snapping, because when you finally put the pads on and you got people lining up across from you, your processing and your speed and your play time speeds up a little bit, because you're so focused on snapping and getting ready to block and getting to your assignment that you might forget about the easiest part and the most important part, which is delivering a good snap in shotgun. So I expect that to come along a little bit, but it has been a little concerning to see the defensive line kind of really get after the quarterback and provide a lot of pressure and put would-be sacks. Obviously, you can't hit the quarterback, but would-be sacks when you do not have two of your good pass rushers. So that maybe is a little bit of indictment on the offensive line, and maybe not as good as on the defensive line. But either way, training camp is continuing to roll on. No crazy injuries as of yet. I don't know if you heard that, but I just knocked on my wood table because we don't want that. So nothing crazy on that front. Hopefully Cam Smith is going to be able to return soon, and everyone else continues to stay healthy and rehabs well and gets back on the football field sooner rather than later. That's going to do it for today's show. Appreciate everyone for hanging out with me here on a Wednesday, talking some Dolphins football. I'll see you again with another video tomorrow. Peace out, Fins fans. Go Fins.